Thank you for tuning in to the Leroy Brown Talk Show. Today is September 16th. It's Monday morning. There's a couple of things that I do want to talk about, and you know, I I actually wrote something. I wouldn't really call it a speech, but it's not like a Jerry Maguire memo statement. So, what I wrote is this: one has to ask oneself, what do we want to be remembered for? Every generation is faced with adversity, violence, and inequality since the birth of this nation, when the first shots were fired April 19th, 1775, when the Sons of Liberty engaged the British rule. Our first president, George Washington, was once asked if he sided with any political party, and he answered, however, political parties may now and then answer popular ends, they are likely in the course of time and things to become potent engines by the cunning ambitions of the unprincipled men will be enabled to subvert the power of the people and to usurp themselves the reins of the government, destroying afterwards the very engines which have lifted them to unjust dominion. We find this more and more apparent with the recent rhetoric of the left. They shout out how someone is guilty before an investigation, impeachment charges before any proof is brought forth. They incite violence wherever their party doesn't get their way. We have to decide as Americans, will you stand by as your country is being torn apart by corrupt politicians, a corrupt media, corrupt celebrities? Or will you stand for the freedoms that have been fought for over 243 years? Every American must live by a code. General MacArthur once said, duty, honor, country. Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. They are not a slogan or a flamboyant phrase. We have to realize that duty, as Americans, we need to honor our past, no matter how offensive you might find it. We should all put our country first. The American way of life is protected by every soldier, sailor, Marine, and Coast Guardsman and airman. When it comes down, no greater way was this captured other than during World War I by Private Treptow. He was killed in battle, and when he was killed in battle, a diary was found on him. Inside that diary, he pledged the following: America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure, I will fight cheerfully to do my utmost, as if the issue of the whole struggle depend upon me alone. Today we find ourselves violating the very thing so many have fought and bled and sacrificed for. Must we fall into the dark ages again to find how lucky we were to be born free because of the bravery of others before us? Must we only find patriotism on events like December 7th, Pearl Harbor, September 11th, or the 4th of July? Marcus Aurelius once said, there was a dream that was once Rome, that if you were to whisper it, anything more than a whisper would disappear. It would vanish. It was so fragile. The U.S. is a very young country. We have overcome being ruled by a tyrant, falling under the threat of a czar and a Nazi ruler and a Japanese ruler. We have failed our brothers when it comes to the treatment of the Native Americans and the slaves that were brought to America, but through their failures came the rise of leaders such as Quanah Parker, Chief Joseph, Geronimo, Black Hawk, Dennis Banks, and the Native American community, along with Martin Luther King, Medgar Evans, Malcolm X, and the African American community. If it were not for them, we would have never been able to see someone like Barack Obama in the Oval Office. I wouldn't trade any of what they had to go through and what they said so that we as Americans could live in a better today. Because through their inequality and through their struggle, came the success of future generations, and we must remember that. General Norman Schwarzkopf gave an address to the Corps of Cadets in 1991. General Schwarzkopf opened by saying, "To be a 21st century leader, you must have two things: competence and character. Out there among you are the cynics. They are the people that scoff at character and the people that scoff at hard work. I can assure you, when the going gets tough, they will not be there. Where are the Pattons? Where are the Eisenhowers? Where are the Bradleys? Where are the MacArthurs? They're all gone. We don't have any out there. They were out there, and they are out there, and you will be out there." The amazing thing is we are all faced with adversity. We are all faced with something that is going to take us from one place to another. The amazing thing is we were all tough to take pride and honor in our flag. We are moving further and further away from it every day. We are teaching children that it's okay to think, that it's not okay to think out of the box. It's racist to be an American. Our country was founded by the fathers of a melting pot. That all men are created equal. That's how you end up with a Native American woman named Rosa Naomi Parker and a Caucasian man, Ollie Linwood Greenhill, to have a grandchild, or to have a child named Claude Elvis Greenhill, a daughter named Catherine Ann Greenhill, and a grandchild named Addison Leroy Brown. I was raised to love anyone who loves me, treat others with honor, and to have integrity. That hard work and sacrifice lead to a better life. JFK once said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country." How far have we fallen today? We teach it's better for a handout and a benefits check to live off of than to work for something greater. We once reached to go to the moon, not because it was easy, but because it was hard. We have pushed forward in every generation, from the age of steel with Cornelius Vanderbilt to the age of the car with Henry Ford, to Thomas Edison that took us out of the darkness with electricity, to Alexander Graham Bell who made us able to talk to one another. Through ambition and hard work, we have been able to overcome. Will you cower to roll up your sleeves, or will you launch us into the next century? We must innovate. We must fight. You cannot have tranquility and freedom without those two things. We must sacrifice those brave enough to go to war so that our children can go and grow up in a better tomorrow. Robert E. Lee once said, "Do your duty in all things. Like the old Puritan, you can do more. You should never wish to do less." We as Americans must do our part and hold those who threaten our sovereignty as a nation accountable, and have no room for communists or socialists in doctrine, for we are a republic, first and foremost. We must always remember that we are the descendants of revolutionists and immigrants, that the waving red, white, and blue flag would not exist without them. I serve this country not just for yours and my children's future, but for a better life. I come from parents who worked 2 jobs while I was in high school. Although I was an average student, my only hope for college was through sports. When my country was attacked, I put my goals on hold and bare arms against those who threatened my very liberty. We must all be able to find ourselves fighting for something that we find most dear to our hearts. We can't depend upon someone else to fight in our stead. We have to be able to want it ourselves. I never imagined that I would witness some of the bravest men who fought beside me gasp for their last breath, that I too would find myself wounded by the enemy. Do not sacrifice someone else. Go unanswered. We sleep peacefully at night because men do our deeds the night before. President John F. Kennedy once said, "Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival of the excess of liberty." This needs to remain a truth, whether it's Iran, Russia, China, or some future dictator. We are given the Second Amendment, which is a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, so that we still will be able to fight if someone threatens our republic. That if our military might were to falter, its citizens can prevail. President Reagan once said, "Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction." We didn't pass it on to our children through the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on to them to do the same. We cannot expect everyone to be happy. Our country is only as strong as its weakest link. In the military, I was taught quitting, fear, individualism is a cancer. We must strive to achieve. Some people will find success in every walk of life, yet those who seek it out after failures change the world with every step forward they take. Our amendments were put forth for our success. Washington said, "If the freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent may be led like sheep to their slaughter." Would you sacrifice one amendment to appease a certain party? Or would you rather support the Constitution and the Bill of Rights to ensure the very freedom of the future generations? Malcolm X once said, "If you're not ready to die for it, put the word freedom out of your vocabulary." Our country is faced inevitably of withering away. If we put our pursuit in liberty last and the pursuit of others first, we will fail. We should put our veterans second to our freedom. We see veteran suicide on the rise and veteran health care far worse than the illegals that come into our country. I have worked most of my life. Our generation must live by Bruce Campbell's words. If you're worried about getting a job or keeping one, start a company of your own. By doing so, you'll reap the rewards of your hard work, and you'll only get fired if you fail. This is the land of opportunity. Live in it. I have owned 2 companies that did well. Through the work of others, they found their struggles, and I once owned a clothing store and a firearm store. Although they were not as successful as I hoped, I haven't stopped innovating or trying to be successful. I want nothing more than not to worry about my finances of tomorrow. To have a big house, new cars, nothing is given to you. You have to work hard and strive every day for a better you for tomorrow. We must fight for a better tomorrow. We must strive for a better tomorrow. That if we fail to stand for tomorrow, we will not succeed for the things that matter most today. Now, I know some of you are going to argue with this, the little speech that I wrote. But in all honesty, I think it's time that we grow up and start to realize where we're falling short, where we're not living up to our own expectations. So many have come before us, from the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Civil War, World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm, Kosovo, Bosnia, Operation Enduring Freedom, Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation New Dawn, so that we could be happy. So that we can have the big TV. So we can have the new car. So we can have the nice couch. So we can watch NFL football on Sundays and college footballs on Saturday. If you're an NHL fan, an NBA fan, a sports fan, you would have none of those if it weren't for the sacrifices of the people who have fought for your very freedom. We make our heroes out to be those who are on an athletic field. We fail to make heroes out of those who fought for them to be on that pedestal. As many of you know, I'm a huge Gamecocks fan. I'm a huge New England Patriots fan. And I would not raise my kid to sit here and say, hey, try to be like Tom Brady. Hey, be like George Rogers. I don't want my kid to be that way. Because athletics, as great as they are and as much of a way as they are to, take your mind off of the things that bother you most, it's your weekly fix to get off of whatever's bad if your team's successful. But I would rather my child look up to Paul Revere, John Adams, Samuel Adams, George Washington, Omar Bradley, Dwight D. Eisenhower, John F. Kennedy. I would want my kid to remember my president and commander-in-chief, George W. Bush. There are things that define every generation. And we find ourselves stuck in caring about things that don't matter most. Well, what type of hairstyle does this celebrity have? What movie is this celebrity in? Oh, this celebrity bought this car. This celebrity's being married to this person. Things that don't matter the most to us. And because, some person we admire on the silver screen or, through the radio, we tend to put their views as our views. It was once said, those who fail to learn from history are bound to repeat it. And one of the things that I find amazing is, we used to not have the pollution problem we have now. And that was mainly because most of our consumables were glass. And a U.S. citizen would then take their glass, jar, their glass soda bottle, and they would take it to the grocery store, take it to a convenience store, and they would turn it in for a small reward of 10 to 15 cents. And then the big companies decided to go for plastics, and people started throwing plastics away because, before you were recycling for that glass bottle or that glass jar to be put back on the shelf. Well, now you're not getting paid anything, so you're discarding it. So instead of, the plastics and the trash becoming an issue, the big companies then started the litter bug campaign and pushed for it to be on media and in movies. And, we all remember the commercial with the Italian guy who was dressed up as a Native American with the tear that was falling down. But did we change anything? Is the world less polluted than it was in the 60s? No. Our coral reefs are dying. Our environment's dying. And yet here we are, thrust upon the distinct pleasure of knowing if we do not enact to change, the inevitability is far from its future. If we can't clean up our oceans, the wildlife will die. Therefore, the water will be rendered useless. 90% of the earth is water. The oxygen that's in the sea life is provided by the coral reef. The coral reef is dying. If you don't believe me, Google it. It's starting to turn white, and I believe when it turns white, it's called stalactite. Don't quote me on it. But if the coral reef, which provides the oxygen, dies off, and I think the last time they came out with a study, it said 92% of the Earth's coral is dead. If we run out of oxygen, we'll run out of wildlife. And I'm very grateful to have the job that I have, and I'm not going to sit here and put my religious beliefs up on the air, but one of the things that I did grow up believing is, if you believe in the Bible, it talks about how a man's daily wage, when it comes to a loaf of bread, will be his month's salary, but for a glass of water will be his year's salary. How true is that going to be if our coral die? You look at what's going on with the world and those who lead it, and how everything's getting more intensified with every moment, with just recently what Iran did to Saudi Arabia's oil. Troubling times. That's all it ever is, troubling times. And we sit here, and if you're a historian, World War I was basically in the same type of scenario that we are in now. There was rumors of war. Every country was building up its arms. And it took the assassination of Hans Ferdinand for us to find ourselves in World War I. But yet Woodrow Wilson, who was our president, didn't want to get involved in the war, because Woodrow Wilson said that it didn't really affect the U.S., that the world's problems are not our problems. How far have we failed in that aspect? We care more about children who are homeless or poverty-stricken overseas than the kids here in the U.S. who go without breakfast, without lunch. They get sent to school, have clothes that are tattered and falling apart, not enough food to eat, and once they get out of school, they're still left by themselves. My only advice for the CSRA or for America would be this: before we focus on the others without, meaning other countries, and we need to focus on those who matter most, which is our American people. Because it's our children here that decide the future of tomorrow. I love the fact that we can change anything and we can pursue anything in this great country, and that through this great country and through the flag that waves in the air, that so many have sworn to uphold and protect, that there's a chance for a better tomorrow. We can't change the past, but we can certainly change our future. And I want my closing statement to be, if we keep tearing down the things that someone finds offensive, we'll fail to realize the sacrifice of those who changed to make it. And what I mean by that is, I had family that fought in the Civil War, and, my family was a poverty-stricken family. We weren't rich by any means. The Browns weren't. And if I had a 52-year-old great-grandfather who was in the Confederacy, he fought not because he had slaves, not because he had a bunch of land, because his house was burnt down by the Union. 52 years old, fought so that he could get his house back that someone burnt down. But teaching our kids that everyone who fought in the Civil War was a racist if they were in the Confederacy is the wrong thing to teach. Tearing down monuments that remind us of our path that we took to get to where we are today is only going to lead us back down that same road. Should we tear down anything in Germany that reminds us of the Holocaust so that we may not remember the millions of Jews who were killed by Adolf Hitler? I don't think so. I think Auschwitz should stay for as long as it needs to be able to be up so that people can understand that at one point in time, someone decided to injure and harm millions of families. And through one person's idiotic beliefs, it took two countries, Great Britain and the U.S., to come together to hold off the Nazi Party that had conquered so much. We remember the World War II vets, and we remember, certain things, but we tend to find ourselves ignoring the things that mattered so most. That's our show for today. Tomorrow we'll talk about college football, and we'll talk about the NFL after Monday Night Football tonight. But if you'd like to sponsor the Leroy Brown Talk Show, you can do so by calling 706-738-9191. You can tune in to us through the TuneIn app at 92.9 WYBO. You can also listen to the podcast on http 929soulmine.com. If you'd like to follow us on Facebook, you can at the Leroy Brown Talk Show. On Instagram, the Leroy Brown Talk Show. You can email us at the Leroy Brown Talk Show at gmail.com if there's a certain topic you want us to talk about. I'm your host, Leroy Brown. Have a good day, CSRA, and remember that if your main chute doesn't deploy, you always have your reserve on standby.